My grandfather had survived the Titanic. He told me the truth before he died, and now I wish he hadn't. Growing up, I was always proud that my great-grandfather had survived the Titanic. My family would talk about it on holidays, almost like a legend passed down. They said he was just 12 years old, boarded the ship with his parents, got onto a lifeboat in the chaos, and lived. That was it. Simple, clean, heroic. But he never spoke about it. Not to my father, not to reporters, not even when people begged. For decades, he just said, "That part of my life sank with the ship." Until the end. 3 weeks before he died, I visited him in hospice care. He looked frail, hollowed out, his eyes distant. But when he saw me, something changed. He asked the nurse to leave, made me lock the door, turn off the lights, and sit close. "I need you to listen," he said, "and I need you to promise you'll never repeat what I'm about to tell you." I swore I wouldn't, but I'm breaking that promise now, because for the past 2 weeks, I've been dreaming things I can't explain, things I think are connected to what he told me that night, and I need someone else to know, because something is waking up again. He told me the first few days on the Titanic were what you'd expect: cold ocean air, lavish meals, strangers chatting over cigars. His parents were thrilled. He said he wandered the decks wide-eyed, fascinated by how grand everything was. Then came the fourth night. It started innocently. He was standing on deck with his parents, looking at the stars. Everyone was laughing about how big the moon looked, pointing their fingers and trying to take photos. But then the laughter stopped. The moon began to glow red. Not a soft, romantic red, but deep, sickly, arterial. Veins pulsed across its surface. Then it began to change. A shape formed. A face, but not a human face. The mouth was impossibly wide, Grandpa whispered, staring into nothing. Stretched to the ears. It had no eyes, just sockets, like a mask made of skin. He said the mouth looked like it was screaming, but no sound came, just the wind, the still, endless wind. People began to change. One woman calmly removed her husband's glasses and bit into his ear like it was meat. A child picked up a shattered wine glass and carved into his nanny's neck. The blood was bright on his pajamas. Others stared at the sky, their mouths moving, whispering together like a prayer. "It's awake. It's hungry." He repeated that over and over. I still hear his voice saying it. One young crew member, Grandpa never learned his name, didn't go mad. He was twitchy, terrified, but lucid. He had a pistol, just 6 shots. He shot 2 attackers clean through the head. When they didn't go down, he shot again. Grandpa watched him fight through a mob, snapping bones, screaming, finally disappearing into the crowd. Later, he saw them dragging his body to the cargo hold. Not to eat, not right away. They were offering him, he said. That's when the lifeboats were lowered. Not by calm order, but by panicked survivors trying to escape whatever was happening above. A few of the sane made it off. Grandpa was pulled by a bleeding officer into one of the smaller boats. He remembers the man holding a rag to his neck, telling the others, "Don't row toward the Carpathia. Don't go east. Go west. Toward the ice." They argued. They didn't understand. But then Grandpa looked back and saw other lifeboats full of passengers, screaming, laughing, chewing their own fingers. A woman with a split-open face, clapping and singing. The red moon reflecting in their eyes. "They're following," the cook said. "If they reach land..." He didn't finish. He just rowed harder toward the ice. Grandpa said the man at the helm deliberately turned the boat toward a nearby iceberg. "We crash," he told them. "Hard. We take them down with us." And they did. The impact shattered the boat. Bodies flung into the sea. Screams, cracking wood. Blood on the white blue ice. Everyone died, except Grandpa. He had jumped seconds before, clung to the iceberg with his fingers raw and frozen, his chest screaming with cold. He watched as the other lifeboats circled, like vultures, before drifting apart into the dark. When the Carpathia found him the next morning, he was the only one still alive. Barely. Then came the cover-up. It was easier to say it was just the iceberg, he told me. People wanted it to be a tragedy, not a plague. The survivors were told to keep quiet. Those who didn't vanished. Some were institutionalized. Some went missing. Others were paid off by White Star Line agents, their mouths sealed with coin. Grandpa got nothing, just nightmares, for 80 years. He said sometimes the moon came back, in dreams, in mirrors, in puddles, in the glint of silverware. "It's not dead," he said. "We just fed it enough to sleep again." I didn't believe him. I thought it was dementia, fantasy, some strange attempt to turn tragedy into myth. But that was before my dreams started. They began 2 weeks ago. First, I was on a ship. Then I was on deck. Then the sky turned red. I saw the moon grinning at me. Its face was exactly as he described it. Skin stretched. Black voids for eyes. A mouth like a wound. Then the screams began. I woke up drenched in sweat. That day I found myself avoiding mirrors. I thought it was silly. I kept telling myself that. But then, walking home from work late at night, I passed a puddle near the curb. The moon's reflection smiled at me. Number, it didn't match the sky. It was red. The sky's moon was white. I ran. Didn't stop until I was home. I locked every door, drew the blinds, smashed the mirror in my hallway. I haven't slept in 2 nights. When I close my eyes, I feel the moon watching me. Last night, I saw something worse. I dreamt I was back on the Titanic. But it wasn't 1912. People wore clothes from now. Phones, laptops, Wi-Fi routers plugged into cabin walls. But they all stared at the moon, whispering, "It's awake. It's hungry." This morning, I saw headlines trending on Twitter. Mass hysteria on cruise ship. 12 dead. Passengers claim moon was red. Blood moon sightings spike globally. Scientists baffled. Unusual violence during full moon cycle. Psychiatric hospitals report patient overload. I don't think this is just in my head. I think it's happening again. I think we fed it too much. And now it's waking up. If you see the moon turn red, don't look at it. Don't listen to the whispers. Don't get on a boat. If you value your mind, stay away from the sea. Because the thing we buried in 1912 didn't drown. It only slept. And now, beneath the crimson light of a bloated, smiling moon, it remembers. Remember, I was a freshman in high school. I'm currently a senior. My freshman year, I moved schools and started hanging out with a new friend group. 2 friends from that group already lived in my neighborhood, so we usually all just hang out at my house. Whenever we decided to go to my other friend's house, we'd usually just walk, since it was close. Those friends were just renting their house at the time. So, eventually they sold it and bought a house in the same neighborhood. When they moved in, we started hanging out there a lot, since they had a huge garage in their backyard where we could chill without being bothered too much. And we eventually got tired of walking all the way over there, since it was on the complete opposite side of the neighborhood. And since we couldn't drive, we started taking a shortcut. There was a path through someone's lawn on my side of the neighborhood, so we started cutting through their yard. During the day, my friend said that at one point they talked to the owners while they were outside, and they said they didn't mind us walking through their yard as long as we didn't wake them up. They even turned off their motion sensor lights so we could cut through at night without causing commotion, and all was well for a couple of weeks, and until we noticed that the man in the house across the street would always be outside with a cigarette taking pictures of us when we walked up the road. And this went on for a good year or two. We told my parents, but just tried to ignore it altogether since it creeped us out. And the creepiest part was that no matter what time we went through, he was always out there watching and snapping pictures of us. It didn't matter if it was 3 p.m. or 3 a.m. He was always lurking in the shadows of his porch with that cigarette ready to snap a picture. Now fast forward to my junior year. My friend was house sitting for his parents while we were on vacation. We were all staying over there and decided to run over to my house for food. And on the way over, I spotted the cigarette and pointed it out to my friend. Mind you, it was 2:30 a.m. and we could feel this dude staring at us. We started to crab bricks and walked faster and faster until we got off that road. When we got back to my house, we both felt really uneasy, so we grabbed a couple of knives and a can of mace before heading back with snacks. I also decided to grab flashlights since it was especially dark that night. And as soon as we got close to the house again, I got that same eerie feeling. I saw what looked like a person crouch behind a bush in the front yard. I lit the bush up with my flashlight and immediately saw a shadow darting back behind a tree. We started walking fast after and kept looking back every few seconds, and that's when I saw a silhouette of legs standing perfectly still on the other side of the camper in their driveway. I absolutely pooped my pants and sprinted through the shortcut into my friend's back door. I don't know what this guy's intentions are, but they definitely don't seem good. And even now, whenever we walk through there, he's always outside watching. And since then, one very strange thing has happened. I don't know if it was the same guy die, but it very well could have been. One night, we were walking my friend home in my neighborhood and decided to take the long way back to my house to avoid that creepy guy again. We dropped him off and all was well until we started walking back. It was me and 3 other friends. We were almost at the end of the road near the stop sign when a white truck flew up to us, rolled down the window, and started barking questions at us. I tried to remain calm and ask him if there was some problem. He said that someone in a blue hoodie had walked onto his back porch and was banging on the glass door. One of my friends was wearing a white hoodie, by the way. But still, this guy started accusing him of doing it, even though we hadn't gone on anyone's porch at all. He demanded our names, so I just gave him my first name and nothing else. The entire time he had his hand on his hip, looking like he was about to burst a blood vessel in his head. He was so angry, we told him that we were in the complete opposite side of the neighborhood when it happened. But he didn't buy it, and he got angry and just screamed at us. Don't you boys know it's dangerous to be out here at this time? And I just said, now I do. And he pretended to drive off. But as we started walking back, he began following us in his car. For the entire 20-minute walk back, this creepy weirdo trailed us about 100 feet behind in his truck, matching our pace. And he followed us down 3 turns, all the way to my house. And the moment he saw us go inside, he speeds off. I didn't wake my parents. which was stupid, and in hindsight, I definitely should have. So they could have gone outside and asked this weirdo what in God's name he was doing, harassing us alone at 2 a.m. and stalking us back to my house. I don't know if it was the same guy since he claimed his house was in a different side of the neighborhood, but he could have been lying. Anyone unhinged enough to follow some kid's home like that can't be taken seriously. During my 7th grade year of middle school, there was a girl in my class who suddenly took a liking to me. We'll call her Stacy. It was obvious that she liked me, but I didn't care too much about it, especially since at the time it didn't really bother me. A couple of weeks passed since she had made it readily apparent that she had a crush on me. I was at home in my basement when I got a text on my phone. It was from a random number that I had never seen before. And even weirder, I had never given out my iCloud account to anyone from school, and the email itself was random enough that no one could have guessed what it was. I didn't have a phone number at the time anyways. A couple of minutes later, I eventually found out that it was Stacy texting me. I entertained the conversation because I didn't want to be mean and just ignore her, and she started texting me every day like clockwork. At the time, I had a crush on this girl, Amanda, and the Halloween dance was coming up. And about a week before the dance, I got a text from Stacy in this text thread. She finally confessed her feelings for me. I told her that I didn't return those feelings and that I was sorry, trying to be as respectful as possible. Stacy then texted me back, saying she knew that it was a long shot that I'd like her back because she already knew who I liked. In the back of my mind, I was thinking, what? How does she know that? So I asked, how do you know who I like? And she told me Amanda and said that her friend had told her, the friend she mentioned, just having to be dating my friend, the same friend that I had confided in about my crush. I asked, did my friend tell you about who I liked? And she replied, yes. And I was pretty angry. The next day, I confronted my friend, and he swore that he hadn't told anyone. I trusted him, and later that night, I confronted Stacy, and she admitted that she had lied. She figured out who I liked just by staring at me so much. I didn't even know what to say, other than yelling at her to stop talking to me. Fast forward to that summer, and she was still texting me every day, telling me how she needed to get over me. And I mean every day, for about 2 weeks. I kept telling her that she would find someone else who liked her and cared for her, and that I just wasn't the one. And eventually, I got tired of it and told her that if she was really going to get over me, she needed to stop talking to me. And she got angry, and I told her to stop contacting me. And I thought that that was it. But I was so wrong, as the worst was yet to come. Fast forward to my birthday. In the 8th grade, I thought everything had blown over. By then, half a year had passed, and I had put it all behind me. That morning, I got to school and saw that Stacy had taped a drawing to my locker, wishing me a happy birthday. I took the drawing off, shoved it into my locker, and completely forgot about it for the rest of the day. That night, when my friends were over, Stacy texted me and asked why I didn't say thank you for the drawing. I apologized, saying that I had a lot going on that day, and she accepted it and thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. The next morning, I woke up to multiple texts from her telling me how I was wrong for not saying thank you. And at that point, I had finally had enough and just blocked her. Near the end of the school year, we were assigned an essay about a lesson that we had learned in life. It was a pretty easy assignment until I realized that we had to present it in front of the class. My school was small, with only about 40 kids per grade, and each grade was split into 2 sections, so it wasn't the worst thing to present in front of everyone until it was the day arrived when we had to present I believe, essays, when Stacy waddled up to the front of the class and announced that her essay title, Love is a Delicate Matter, and I thought to myself, God, what if this is about me? And it was the entire essay, top to bottom, was about her confessing her love for me. And at the end, she completely slandered me, calling me a jerk that was never worth liking. To begin with, the worst part, the way word traveled in our school, there were no secrets. Everyone had already known that she had liked me since 7th grade. And it was one of the most embarrassing moments I have ever had to sit through. Not to mention, she got a standing ovation, people were crying, and my friends were laughing their butts off. Even the teachers were laughing. I only had one thought for the rest of the day. What just happened? And I thought that this was finally the end of it, but I was wrong again. A couple of years passed, and nothing crazy has happened since until my junior year. A good buddy of mine told me that he needed to talk to me about something important, and we met up in the stairwell, and he told me that Stacy had made a play about us in middle school. Yeah, a full-on play to present in front of an actual crowd. And I was baffled the girl made her whole upbringing about a middle school crush. And it turns out they recorded the play, and I finally got to watch it this year. It was terrible. And I mean, I wanted to pull my eyes out. Kind of bad. And I also saved her essay. That's pretty bad too, anyways. I just graduated, and I hope I never see this dump again. When I was in my early teens, I would ride my bicycle to Kmart to look and buy model cars and supplies. And that was my thing back then, building model cars. I can't say if I was in any real danger, as per the 2 on this sub, but basically I was stalked. And while I was deciding between the 66 Chevelle or the 85 Camaro, I saw this man, mid-30s, is walk past the aisle that I was in. Then he passed the same aisle from the other end. Once I made up my mind, settled on the IR, and left the aisle. He was on the far end and started walking down the parallel aisle to me. I wasn't weirded out yet, but I made a detour down another aisle to ditch him, or so I thought. I doubled back and got to the main aisle that led toward the front, toward the registers. He popped out on another aisle, further up facing me, then turned down the next one, and each time I encountered him, he smiled, making eye contact. So I put the model down, turned 180 degrees, and headed back toward the back of the store. There was a service entrance back there, so I made for that, thinking that I had lost or confused him. I still wanted to build that Camaro, so I went back toward the front, and there he was, sitting on a bench in the lobby, still making eye contact, and still smiling, and waiting. At this point, the obvious answer would have been to just turn and bolt. But in an effort to keep my bike from getting stolen, I secured it to the railing inside the lobby, and I didn't want to stand still in his presence. I quickly went back into the store and zigzagged through the aisles, trying to lose him. And by now, I was sufficiently freaked out, but still didn't want to make a scene. Every time I made my way back out into the main aisle, there he was. I was walking at a brisk pace, and he was just casually strolling, but always in my direction. And at one point, I passed the sporting goods section, so I picked up a baseball bat and started carrying it, and I passed the main aisle on purpose. Now, showing him my weapon, he seemed to be unfazed, just casually making his way up and down the aisles, still smiling, still making eye contact. I was just short of running now, almost back into the service department, when he gave up the subterfuge of chance encounters. He was directly following me. He wasn't at my pace, but he managed to keep up, and I gave up. I tossed the bat and made for the service desk. And a relatively stout African American man was there. And I said, "Hey, I think this guy throwing a thumb in his direction is following me. Can you call someone? He hadn't come around the corner yet." So I never saw his reaction, but we heard a crash and heavy, fast footfalls. He had run toward the service entrance, knocking over a display on the way out. The service rider stood by with me while the police were called, and once they arrived, the police took a few statements, did a walk around. He was long gone, and then put my bike in their cruiser and drove me home. I didn't go back to Kmart on my own again until I was old enough to drive, and I still never went back for that model Camaro. When I was 18 and newly graduated, I ran into some issues with my attempts to enroll in college, and also had a hard time finding a job in my area in the meantime, which led to me having to sign on at the job center. They determined that I was too shy to succeed in interviews and placed me in a group that was supposed to teach interview skills. In order to fix that, the group ended up ultimately being a complete waste of time. I honestly think that they put me in the wrong group, or just needed an extra member and made an excuse to throw me in to make up the numbers. But that's not really relevant to the story, and the other group members didn't do much to help with my shyness either, since they were all men who were at least 4 decades older than me, and obviously didn't share any of my interests. Unfortunately, I ended up gaining the attention of the one member I wanted nothing to do with. I don't actually remember the man's name at this point, but I think it was something generic, like John, so that's what I'll call him. JN immediately got off on the wrong foot with the rest of the group when he interrupted the instructor during their instruction to the course to complain that him being there was useless since he would be retiring in a few years anyway, and no one wanted to hire someone who had spent over 10 years in prison. When that didn't get him the reaction that he wanted, I assumed the rest of the group just thought that he was a weirdo or attention-seeking, and the instructor had heard similar things before from people who weren't happy about being in the course, and he waited until we had been given the paperwork to complete, and then turned to the man next to him and loudly explained his prison sentence was for beating his ex-wife, but she was a lying jerk and he never put a hand on her. She didn't even have any bruises on her at the trial, or any evidence or bruises or other injuries before that either. But because she was a woman, the judge automatically believed her and sent him to jail. Those are his words. And this immediately set me on edge. I'm not an expert when it comes to the law, but I do watch true crime channels on YouTube, and I have never heard of a sentence of over 10 years for a single beating that supposedly never even happened or didn't leave visible injuries. Either John was lying and had severely beaten his wife to the point of putting her in the hospital, or he had been arrested on other charges and was covering up what he actually went to prison for. And I immediately decided that I wanted nothing to do with him, regardless of which one it was, and would avoid interacting with him as much as possible, outside of just polite hell and passing him things if he asked. And like I said before, I didn't really interact much with the other members of the group at all because of their ages. I attended the first half of the meeting in the morning, spent the dinner break in the library, while the men all snuck off to the pub and then went home immediately After the second half was over, no one ever asked me how I spent my breaks. And since the pub and library were in opposite directions and couldn't be seen from the front of the building where the group met due to the way the streets were arranged, there should have been no way for any of them to know where I'd been, and that made what happened next even more worrying. About halfway through the course, on one particular day, I bumped into a friend during my dinner break and decided to put off visiting the library until after the course was over so I could catch up with them instead. When I finally got around to it, I spent at least a quarter of an hour there before heading to the desk to check out my books. I ended up being drawn into a conversation with the librarian who had noticed that I was checking out books related to a franchise that he also enjoyed, one that was getting a new movie the fall following year. There were only a handful of other people in the library, so I didn't see anything wrong with chatting with a friendly man around my age who shared my interests after 8 hours of boredom and paperwork. We've been talking for another quarter of an hour when he suddenly glanced over my shoulder, looking confused and concerned. He had just opened his mouth to say something when someone grabbed me by the shoulders. My friends and family know that I hate having my shoulders touch without warning and would never have done that to me. So I immediately knew that whoever was touching me was a stranger. I knocked their hands away while turning around and backing up into the librarian's desk. It was John. He was standing directly behind me with a huge smile on his face. And as soon as I turned around, he made a joke about knowing that he would find me there and how I practically lived in the library before chattering away. As if we were close friends, I was very confused. It was obvious that he had just coincidentally bumped into me from the way he was talking, but JN had kept behind while the group was leaving because he had filled out his paperwork incorrectly, and as I mentioned before, you can't see the library from the building, so he shouldn't have had any way of knowing where I had gone. It had also been half an hour since I left the building, so if he had left shortly after me and simply seen me go inside while walking in the same direction, he would have come in by then. The only way it made sense for him to know, to look for me there, and joke that I practically lived there was if he somehow learned that I was going to the library during my dinner breaks, knew that I hadn't that day, and guessed that I wouldn't go after the meeting instead. What made this even stranger was the fact that John had never shown any interest in me during the group sessions and mostly ignored me the same way that I ignored him unless we were forced to interact for some reason. So why he was now following me into other buildings to start conversations out of nowhere and acting like we were close was very odd. While John was still talking, the librarian leaned in and asked if I knew him. He had obviously noticed my negative reaction to being touched, and when I briefly explained the situation, the librarian politely asked John to leave me alone or leave the building. John refused and tried to insist that we were friends, completely ignoring the fact that I had just said that we weren't, and how ridiculous it would be to claim that an 18-year-old girl and a 50-some or 60-some old man were friends in the first place, when the librarian asked again, outright stating that harassing other customers was not acceptable, and that John would be removed if he refused to leave alone. John smiled and agreed to leave, but in the tone that you would use to humor a child, and then, after walking out, he very obviously stationed himself right outside the doors, waiting for me to leave. As well, the The librarian was clearly concerned by this and asked for the full story of what was going on. I told him, including my suspicions that John had been following me around without my knowledge to figure out that I would be there in the first place. He suggested that I stay in the library until his break so he could walk me to my bus stop to make sure Johan left me alone. But his break was several hours away. If I had waited, I wouldn't have gotten home in time to change and head to another meeting that I had later that evening. And since I couldn't stay, he asked me to at least come in the next time that I was there to let him know that I was safe. And he reluctantly watched me leave. John immediately stepped into my personal space when I got outside, jokingly asking what the librarian's problem was, and still acting like we were friends. I tried to walk around him without answering and head to the bus station to go home, but he grabbed my arm and reminded me that there was a closer stop for our bus. When I told him that we weren't getting the same bus because I had never seen him on mine, he corrected me and stated that we both needed the numerous such and such bus, and telling me where he lived, which in fact was on the same bus route as me. And although I was tempted to walk away and go to the station instead, or even sneakily get on a different bus and just walk the rest of the way home, it was clear that he was going to follow me. He still had a hold of my arm, refusing to let go when I tried to pull away, and there were several dark alleys along the way that I had no intention of going near. While in his company, when I had agreed to go to the closer bus stop, he finally let go of me and started walking at my side, chattering like we were still good friends again. When we reached the stop, John kept walking, which seemed odd, but I hoped that my lack of response had finally made him give up and leave me alone. Or maybe he had confused that stop with another further along, and I could run while his back was turned. But no such luck. As soon as he had realized that I wasn't following, he came back, frowning as if he were confused, and asked, "I thought we were going for coffee together." Shocked, I bluntly told him no. He kept pushing, trying to convince me that I had agreed to go with him. When that didn't work, he switched tactics and claimed that I had mentioned wanting coffee while leaving the classroom. That was an obvious lie, since I don't drink coffee, and I told him so. John's only response was to say I didn't have to get coffee and keep pushing me to go to a cafe with him when I firmly refused. He apparently took that his not wanting to drink in public because then he attempted to invite me to his flat. If that wasn't weird enough, he started telling me that if there was a naked girl on the couch when we got there, I wasn't to worry because that was his 18-year-old daughter. Because, of course, an 18-year-old would just definitely be lounging around naked on her father's furniture in front of him. Right, other people at the stop were staring at us now, and I took the opportunity to point out that I was also 18, and I firmly told John that I didn't want to go to his flat and to leave me alone, and he completely ignored the last part and tried to claim that I was lying about my age and saying that I was at least 29, when most people at the time still mistook me for being in my early teens at first glance. At that moment, the bus arrived, and I got on as quickly as possible, thinking that I would be safe if necessary. The driver would just throw him off. But no, I sat in an aisle seat to block John from sitting next to me, but he physically shoved me across the seat, pinning me against the window so tightly I could barely move. He pressed his knees against the seat in front to make sure that I had no way to get past him unless he allowed it, and the ride felt endless. He kept touching me, trying to convince me to go to his flat, And although a few people gave me uncomfortable looks when I tried to make eye contact with some of the men, they would quickly look away or become very interested in their phones. As soon as I got home, I emailed the instructor, explained everything, and asking to switch groups. She ignored it for an entire week until I followed up, threatening to involve the police, and their solution was to tell me that I could leave the course early, instead essentially kicking me out. If I were the problem, I saw John a few times after that, but fortunately, he never noticed me or approached me again, and I hope it stays that way. And I were silent for a second, frozen, and I looked at him and mouthed, "Run in that." A second, we both sprinted back to his apartment at full speed. Tommy never looked back. As he fumbled to flash his keycard at the locked door, I caught a glimpse of the man's uneven gait as he sped toward us. The door unlocked, and we ran into the lobby, slamming the automatically locking door behind us. We sprinted up the stairs to his floor, where we finally caught our breath. Tommy had a look of pure disbelief in his eyes, and I was shaking with adrenaline. To this day, I have no clue how the man could have followed me 20 mil and known exactly where I was. The level of surveillance that would have required made me feel sick. Tommy was rattled, but he left Ella the next day, and I stayed for another week. But between finals and packing, I never left my apartment. I don't think I'll ever know what that man wanted, or why he harassed me for months. By no means do I want this to deter people from helping the less fortunate. But in rare instances, good deeds can come at unknowingly dark cost. I'd like to say that I don't regret helping him, but I do. When I return to LA in the fall, I'll be in the dorms, as will Tommy. But somehow that man found me across 20 miles. So what's to say that he won't find me again, just a few hundred feet from my old apartment? I can't call the police. What would I even say? He never technically did anything wrong, and law is full of vagrants far outside the concern of law enforcement. And I won't tell my parents either. They'd probably kill me for keeping this from them all year. All I can do is wonder what will happen this fall, and I guess only time will tell. So this, forever in 1988, I was 8 years old, a Mexican-American spending the summer in Mexico. My dad had warned me since childhood that it was dangerous to be out in the fields or graveyards alone. Especially at night, I grew up with a fear that magic was real and alive in Mexico, particularly out in the countryside that night. It was dark out, no electricity, only oil lamps, and I didn't know how to work one. So I just sat on the front porch in the moonlight, listening to the bugs. They were louder than usual. And then I heard footsteps, more than one person, very close. There was no way that I could have missed them. When they were further away, I looked around, beginning to panic. I didn't hear any voices or any banter, just shuffling, and it got louder, and it sounded like a mob. I jumped up and ran inside, tripping a few times, psyching myself out, like I was suddenly in a horror movie, where every stumble meant certain death. I slammed the door shut and unlocked it, grabbed the fireplace poker lying next to the doorway, and ran into my room. No lock on that door. My window faced the moon, lighting up the room enough for my eyes to adjust. And I stood there, poker held short, like a baseball bat, staring at the door for a long time. But there was nothing, and the silence made me feel slightly at ease. I walked over to my bed, about to let myself fall into it, when I glanced at the window. At the last moment, there draped in a headscarf, peering in, was a woman. I landed on my bed with a jolt, feeling suddenly vulnerable, and my grip loosened on the poker, and she was still staring at me. Then she started showing her teeth, but she wasn't smiling. My God. Then a bearded man appeared from the other side. Whispering something to her, he noticed her staring into the window, then turned and saw me, and his face changed. He bared his teeth too. What were wrong with these people? Too scared to shout, I stayed frozen. Everyone in the house was still asleep, and the man lifted his hand and started pressing against the window. Inspecting it, he tapped on the glass lightly at first, and then harder, and it looked like he was about to open it. What do I do? Holding my breath, I just waited. If he broke the window, I was done for. I felt like they were about to drag me by my ankles, all the way to hell. And then common sense kicked in. I remember the poker. I grabbed it and ran to the window, swinging as hard as I could. And that poker smashed against the pane closest to the man, and the glass shattered, and I instinctively squeezed my eyes shut from the shards and noise. And when I opened them again, I could hear them running away. The wind was blowing through the broken window, and there were crickets outside as well. The lights flicked on in the house. My dad and uncle rushed into my room, asking what I've been doing, and then they saw the broken window. My dad flipped out, started shouting, and asked me what the hell I was thinking, and all I could say in English was, there were people outside. They were staring at me, and his eyes immediately went wide, and he shut up. My uncle looked confused. He didn't speak English, and my dad grabbed me by the elbow and barked at my uncle to wake everyone up and get them into the kitchen. My uncle started shouting, telling everyone to hurry, and of the 10 family members, 6 ended up in the kitchen. The other 4, my dad, uncle, and 2 older cousins, went outside armed with a hunting rifle, an old service revolver, and a couple of shovels. They were gone for maybe 10 minutes, but it felt like eternity inside. I tried explaining to my mom and the other women what had happened, and gossip started. My aunt started stirring things up and smirked and told the kids that it was Leona and her husband, and then freaked me and my younger cousin out. Mom and my other aunt shut her down, saying that she was being ridiculous, and then the men came back, and nothing. And they checked again. In the morning, nothing was stolen. No cars, no tools, no chickens. We all just decided to stay up, and there was no way anyone was sleeping. After all of that, coffee and bread went around as we sat together, just throwing out theories. Thieves, spies, Lorona, stalkers even, skinwalkers, came up at sunrise. The whole family went outside to check things over. There was blood right outside my window, and my uncle had missed it in the dark. And my mom was audibly worried. The rest of the day passed without incident, and we stayed for a few nights. But my uncle, cousin, and dad took turn standing guard on our last night. There, someone brought a newspaper from the nearest larger town over, and warned country folk about these roving bands of hyper-poor people, breaking into barns and farmhouses, killing the owners and stealing whatever they could carry, before disappearing back into the hills. 12 people had already been killed. Apparently, only one survivor, a fireman who managed to shoot an intruder and drag himself to town, had lived long enough to tell what had happened, and the town's terrible doctor unfortunately couldn't save him. And my dad's face was grim. Let's who they were, he said years later. I asked what he had told my uncle that night, and his answer chilled me. I told him I saw Hos and my uncle in, and I knew what to do. I looked it up later, and I guess Honos in English means gypsies. Was 3 years ago, right before the pandemic hit. And now, one of my favorite stories to tell. Now that I'm no longer scared, I've moved 1,000 miles away in a few years' time has passed, so my husband was in the military during this time, and I was a housewife due to work being hard for me to get in my area that I was in, as I can't drive and lived off base. Well, any military person knows that a military schedule is pretty darn predictable, and much of our lives ran on an easy to memorize routine. And to make matters worse, my husband was often gone for long hours for about 2 to 3 months. I had been seeing this guy wandering around my home peeking in windows. Honestly, I didn't originally think much of it. Beyond being weirded out, we didn't have anything that would interest a robber. No TV, a single 7-year-old computer, a broken couch and table, and a mattress on the floor. Literally nothing expensive in our home, beyond a gun that was locked up in a safe that might have looked like it had valuables. But that's a lot of work for what looked like a home of people living in Pody. So I didn't think anything of it yet. He kept coming back when my husband was gone. I'd seen him every few days, or hear him due to my normally super sweet cat at the time, hating him, hissing and yelling when he saw him, so I'd know that he was there. When I'd hear my cat making an angry fuss. One day I went out with my husband, and I guess I didn't lock the door properly or something, as our lock could be a bit finicky, and I was running late. According to our normal schedule, I would have gone to base with my husband for a family mandatory fun event and came back home alone and an Uber while my husband stayed at the base to work or hang out with his friends. And what ended up happening was that I fell sick with a migraine. I have hemiplegic migraine, so it can actually be pretty serious, and his sergeant told him to take me home and take care of me when he saw me. Not before I go on, I should probably describe my old home. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment, complex in the mountains. It was a massive complex. My home layout was this. My front door led to my kitchen and dining area, and the wall next to my door had another glass door, I think a patio, and across from my kitchen was my room. Then you go down the hall and hit the living room, which had another glass door wall next to the fireplace. And finally after that, you go across the living room at the end of the hall and reach our guest room, or my plant room, cats, playroom, SLG guest room, which had yet another glass door. I was literally surrounded by giant glass doors. And outside we had a porch, and on the porch was a storage closet where I usually kept my bike, since I couldn't drive due to my migraines and seizures now. Back to the story, now that I've set the scene. When my husband brought me home again, not per our normal schedule, we arrived to find our door slightly ajar. We gave each other a look and went inside anyway, with me mumbling that I must not have locked it properly due to being in a rush that morning. We walked into the kitchen, where my husband immediately went to the fridge, looking around for water for himself and me. He then spoke for the first time in the fridge. Honestly, I don't even remember what he said, but a few seconds after he spoke, we heard something our porch glass door at the back of our home moved, and we both knew that sound really well, since I like to sit in the porch, reading for hours, so I was always coming in and out. He grabbed my shoulder and whispered for me to grab his gun from our room. He then grabbed a knife and went toward the living room. I went and grabbed the gun, noticing on my way into our room that our living room glass porch door was wide open, and upon giving my husband the gun and following behind him, I dialed 911 in my panic, saying I had an active break-in while my husband did a sweep of our home. I walked back down the hall toward the kitchen to see if the intruder had gone around the back to the front, the only way out of the area he went. We lived on a literal mountainside, and one side was blocked off out back, My husband joined the military back in 2012, and we got our first station in 2013. Shortly after working out at the military base gym, I started to notice this creepy dude was active duty and would always show up at the same time I did, and he would just stare at me and smile. He was tall, athletic build, balding, a bit nerdy, and I would guess maybe in his 30s. I personally was in my early 20s at the time, and he ended up approaching me a few times, trying to make small talk, but I told him how my husband was the one active duty, hoping that he'd get the hint. I realized that I never asked this guy's name, and he never gave it to me, and I didn't care to know because he creeped me out. This later turned out to be a mistake, and you'll see why. After 8 long years of going to this gym, the dude was still there, every day staring at me. I was a personal trainer and left my business cards at the front desk of the gym. This is important, for later and after my husband ended his enlistment, we decided to stay in the state. Instead of moving back to our hometown, we found a rental house in the next town over, and we so excited to start our civilian life. My husband was told that he'd be starting night shifts as a contractor for IT work, and I wanted to follow the same schedule so we wouldn't have issues with sleep. I ended up converting our living room into an awesome gym, complete with commercial equipment. This allowed me to work at night from home and train personal clients privately, kind of like a training studio. And I was tired of giving gyms a portion of my paycheck while working for them. And during this time, our schedule was as follows. My husband would leave for work at 11 p.m. and work until 7 a.m. We'd stay awake while I trained clients at home from 5 a.m. to noon, and then go to bed at around 2 p.m. and sleep until around 9 p.m. I was signed up through a company called Find Your Trainer, where clients could find trainers online in their area, and the company would schedule them for sessions with me, and they would prepay through the website, and it was essentially a scheduling service. One day, my phone chimed with an email saying that I had a new client scheduled for Wednesday who had purchased 6 sessions. I was excited to be making some money and watching my business grow, and when the time came for the client to show up, I was nervous, but overall excited. The doorbell rang, and what do you know? It was him, because he had signed up through Find Your Trainer and not directly with me. I had no choice but to train him. I hoped that it wouldn't be too awkward, but I couldn't understand why he was willing to pay me $63 per session when he was clearly in shape and knew what he was doing at the gym. I started the first session with an arm workout, but I felt like I was wasting my time. It was obvious that he already knew how to work out, and that irritated me. I got into training to help people who actually needed assist in transforming their health and body, and the whole session was awkward. And at one point, he commented on how nice I looked that day, and I forced a smile and said thank you. For the next session, I planned to train him on back day, and as I demonstrated a lat pull down to his 63 body, while me being only 5'0" myself, I felt self-conscious and just wanted to get it over with. Then he told me I was doing it wrong and asked if he could show me. I was offended, considering I was the trainer in this situation, but I tried to remain professional as I began to get up from the bench so he could correct me. He swooped in behind me and reached around to grab the handle above, but on the way to the handle, he grabbed my boob. I quickly jumped up and told him that was inappropriate, and then the session was over And that night, I texted him saying I needed to terminate his sessions due to inappropriate behavior, and he simply responded that he understood about 3 days later. I was up at 3 a.m. reading a book in my muumuu. When I heard a noise outside, I froze, and my heart began racing. Surely not. I didn't own a gun at the time, and I didn't have a dog, just a parrot that liked to cuss everyone out, and 2 cats. I got up and peed through the blinds and saw a man's foot disappearing around the corner as our shed flew open. I freaked out, grabbed a butcher knife, and called 911, telling them that someone was trying to break into our house. The cops arrived and searched the property, but couldn't find the suspect. Several of my husband's tools had been stolen from the shed, and I found a report and asked the police to contact the HOA to check the security cameras to see who had entered the neighborhood that night. A few days later, the police called me back with an update. They had spoken with the HOA, and as it turned out, their cameras were decoys. And that evening, we went to Walmart, and as I was entering, I saw my former client leaving. He glared at me. I couldn't help but think that it wasn't a coincidence. I had gotten rid of him without a refund, and now my husband's tools had been stolen. Surely it was him seeking revenge. The following week, my husband took me to buy my first gun and a German Shepherd, and now it's 2025. My husband just got back on night shift yesterday, and we now own a home in a nicer neighborhood with a solid security system, but I'm always on edge, hoping that I never run into that weird stalker guy. I started drinking heavily before bed, sometimes smoking, just to dull the anxiety enough to pass out. It worked, barely. After a week, the nightmares eased. I told myself it had just been smoke inhalation, a bad trip, my mind filling in the blanks with terror. Another week, and I was almost normal. Almost. The memory started to rot, like a wound trying to scab over. I convinced myself it was behind me, until Cindy found me. I was sitting alone on a park bench, nursing a coffee and staring at the trees. She appeared like a ghost, tall and slender, with dark hair pulled into a tight braid. She looked worried, haunted. "You don't remember me, do you?" she asked. I shook my head. "The factory," she said. Every muscle in my body locked up. "You were there," she continued. You weren't moving. I tried to pull you out, but you wouldn't budge. You were just kneeling there, staring into the fire like you were part of it." "What was I looking at?" I asked, throat dry. She shook her head. "I couldn't see. I didn't want to." Her hand brushed my leg. Her skin was cold. "It's good to see you made it," she whispered. "I didn't think you would." She invited me to her apartment that night, promised fried chicken, cheap beer, and horror movies. I said yes, desperate for some human connection to anchor me back to normality. Her apartment was strange, too clean, too empty. No pictures, no decorations, just white walls and a massive, ancient TV sitting on the floor. We ate in silence, the fried chicken turning to sawdust in my mouth. After dinner, she pulled out a battered VHS tape, grinning. "Found footage horror," she said. "You'll love it." She blew dust off a VCR, slotted the tape in. The TV hummed to life, screen flickering black for what felt like forever, before plain white text appeared. Part 1. Static. Then a static shot of an empty field at night. Trees silhouetted against a bloated moon. A dilapidated farmhouse in the distance. The camera didn't move. Minutes crawled past. Wind whispered through the grass, the only sound. I shifted, uncomfortable. Cindy said nothing, staring intently at the screen. Finally, The camera jerked forward, a shaky walk through dense forest. No sound but the crunch of boots on dead leaves. The cameraman moved slowly, deliberately. Then the trees cleared, and there it was. The factory. Our factory. My gut twisted. The footage approached the entrance, pushed through. Inside, the burned-out skeleton of the rave was eerily intact, like the fire had never happened. The camera found the stage, stopped. A figure stood there, pale, dark-haired, camcorder in hand, filming. I ripped my gaze from the screen. "What the fuck is this?" I demanded. Cindy smiled, slow and cold. "I thought you liked horror movies," she said. "Where did you get this?" "I've always had it," she said simply. My heart thundered. I bolted, crashing through her apartment door, racing down the hall, lungs tearing for air. Back home, I locked every door, every window. I drank until the room spun, until I could forget her smile. But I couldn't forget. The next morning, I called Jack, a cop I knew, gave him Cindy's address. He promised to check it out. Hours later, he called back. "There's no such address," he said. "Never has been." Panic clawed up my throat. I scoured my memory, trying to remember how I got to her place. But the memory was gone, eaten away like moth-eaten fabric. Dream or not, it felt real, too real. Now, at night, I hear the faint whir of a camcorder lens, adjusting, just beyond the walls. I catch glimpses of pale skin and bulging eyes in the reflections of dark windows. Sometimes I wake to the smell of smoke, thick and cloying. Sometimes I find videotapes on my doorstep, blank labels staring up at me like accusations. I don't watch them. I can't, because deep down, I know what's on them, and I know who's filming. Not Cindy, not the pale cameraman, me. And somewhere, someone else is sitting alone, staring into the screen, watching as I burn, watching and waiting for their turn, and waiting for